Hello and welcome to part 9 of the Transformer tutorial series. As you can see, I started from scratch. I started with the default blend file, and the reason is that we're not going to do anything in 3D anymore. We're just using Blender as a compositor tool. So what we're going to do is press Ctrl left arrow to go to the compositing layout, and I'm gonna use nodes and remove the render layers node because we're not gonna do any rendering. We're gonna open a lot of our saved files we did in the previous parts. Let's do that. Go to input and choose image. And we have an input image, and you can open your image. So these are the images I created when at render time, and I'm gonna first open, well actually I'm gonna open the original shot, so the original MOV file. So let's open that one, and there we go. It's a movie and the frames is set to 1, which is weird because that's not what we want. Let's set it to 500, and we might as well change the frame range of the project. The end frame is 500 and the start frame was 144, as you may remember from previous parts. Alright, so we set the end frame, or the number of frames. Doesn't really matter. If you set it to 500, it will reach 500, so that's enough. So let's plug it in here and press F12 to see what we plugged in here in the image viewer. And as you may notice, it's a bit cropped. That's because the resolution is set to half HD, so we have to set this to the original size, which is 1280 by 720 at 100%. And if we now press F12 again, we will have the full frame. Alright. Now I can collapse this to get some more room here. And yeah, let's add another image input. So now I want to open some of my robot passes. So I'm gonna go into the render folder and open the robot passes file. And let's start with the alpha channel. So I'm gonna open the first alpha channel frame, which is 144. Let's open it. And then we have to choose image sequence and set the frames to 500. And that will be fine. So now I can plug this in here, and we don't see anything. Let's press shift left arrow to go to the first frame of our sequence, and if we scrub through the timeline, you can see we have an alpha channel of the robot, which is cool. And it looks good. Okay, that works. Let's collapse it, and I'm gonna duplicate it with Shift D, and then press Y to constrain it to my Y axis, and press -40 to make this nice and tidy. And now I have to choose, I'm gonna go into the properties so I don't have to expand it. Go into the properties over here, which is in the N toolbar. When you press N, it will toggle on and off. So I'm going to open the next frame sequence, which would be depth. No, not depth. I'm going to choose diffuse direct. Alright, open that, and it will snap back to a single image. So set it back to image sequence and do it again. Shift D, Y -40. Alright, and choose diffuse indirect now. There we go. open that. And if you want to preview this, you can just plug it in. This is the direct diffuse color and the indirect, which is black somehow. Oh, it's set to single image. Change it back to image sequence. There we go. Okay, I'm gonna do this for every pass I have. I'm gonna be back with you when I have everything. Okay, so now I have all my input images, all my image sequences. So let's take a look at them. This is glossy, and it might be a good idea to give these things labels to know what they are. This is emission, this is probably transmission, and this is depth. And this is the vector pass. Alright, so yeah, it's a good idea to give those things labels. So the first thing was alpha. Yep. Let me make this a bit bigger, then you can see what name it is. So I'm gonna just call this alpha. Go to the next, diffuse direct. Make it short. Diffuse indirect. And so on and so forth. So now we have all these passes, and actually I opened the robot. I'm not gonna need the robot just yet to composite over the shot, but let's just combine these passes to get the final look of the robot. So we can do this by it's very simple, because we did the pre-compositing, we did all the weird stuff before saving, so now it's just a matter of adding everything together, except for the alpha and the depth and vector, of course. But all these passes we have to just add together. So I'm gonna add a color mix node, whoops, and set it to add and collapse it, and just plug everything in and duplicate it. Plug the result of this one into the first slot and the second input here, and just repeat this. This will add everything together. And the result looks like this. This is our beauty pass, created from all the different passes. So we can take this group of add nodes and press Ctrl G to create a group, and tab out of it. Now we have this simple group, and we can call this group, give it a name. We can call it add. So it will just add everything. Okay, yeah, so this is the robot. And then we can add the alpha channel, which we don't have now because there's no alpha channel in those passes. So we can add the alpha channel after we added all the passes. So we can do converter set alpha and plug in the alpha channel into the alpha channel here, and that will create this background, this transparent background. Okay, yeah, the final thing, of course, is adding the depth and vector passes, but I'm not going to do that just yet. So I'm going to leave it here and move this stuff down. And now let's focus on this shot. This was just a quick introduction on how to import these passes, but now I'm gonna add the shadows and reflections to the shot, because that's the thing we have to do first. So let's just take one of these and duplicate them and move them over. And I'm gonna call this shadow and go back to the background passes and open shadow. See where we have it, right there. Open it and set it to image sequence. Okay, and then duplicate it, Y -40, and open the reflection. Set it to image sequence and set the label to reflection. Okay, so to add the shadows to the shot, we have to multiply. To add the reflections, we have to add. So yeah, let's just test if this works. Add a mix node and set it to multiply first to get the shadows. And there we go. They look like shadows. It's a bit dark maybe, but that's probably because the robot is just occluding this. And yeah, so I think that this looks pretty good. We can change the factor to remove them. And yeah, so shadows are successful. Let's try the reflections and set the multiply, set this node to add and plug in the reflection pass. And this is just magic, isn't it? We can see the robot and it's not very apparent, and that may be because we changed the factor to, oh, there we go. To me this looks great. It's even red, and the robot is darker. The reflection of the robot is darker than the reflection of the sky, and it just works because we did the mathematics in the previous part. So that's great. So we successfully added shadows and reflections to the shot. So yeah, I'm gonna leave those nodes open to allow changes to the factors and stuff. We can even exaggerate this effect. There we have it. Anyway, I'm gonna leave it at 1 for now. And this is the first pass we have. And the thing we need to do now is composite the debris first, and then composite the robot on top of the debris, because yeah, that's the way we designed it to work. So I'm gonna just, let me see, I'm gonna just copy, or I'm gonna duplicate this entirely like this, and now I have to change all these input nodes to the appropriate image sequence. So that's gonna take a while, so I'll be back when I am done with this. So see you in a minute. Okay, I'm back. I opened all the image sequences of the debris, and we don't have an emission pass for the debris, so I'm gonna delete this and then set this image, just this input, to black, so it won't add anything. And yeah, so okay, that should work now. Let's try it out. Plug it in here, and we can see we have a successful debris. Okay, so this is the part we can composite on top of the shot with the shadows and reflections. So let's do it. I'm gonna use just a mix node and just mix and plug my debris in and use alpha. Just press this button and it will use the alpha channel, and now we have the debris in the shot. So that went super easy. So let's do the same thing for the robot now. And something went wrong here. I don't know. Okay, we're back. Yeah, so just duplicate this mix node, plug it in here, and move it down, and we can plug in the robot. Alright, it just works. Nice. So this is all it takes to composite everything, and now once we have this basic structure, we can come in and color correct every one of those individual passes. We can add motion blur, we can add a global color correction, we can add filters, anything we like. So let's start with color correction. I'm going to start with the debris, because the debris should really match the color of its ground to integrate and blend in with the original shot. So let's take a look. Let's take a closer look, and to add it, to color correct any of those passes, I like to add RGB curve nodes, and let's collapse it. Let's plug it in here and duplicate it a few times to get every single pass covered with one of those. Alright, so we can click one of them now and we can change the settings over here. That's the way I prefer to do it, so we don't have all these expanded nodes. So let's see, this is the diffuse direct pass. So let's see what we can do with this. Alright, we can make it a lot brighter or darker. I think this is a little bit more red than this, so maybe add some red to the channel and some blue maybe. And there's no real, I mean, I don't really use any trick. It's just, to me, this color correction is just a form of art, so I don't really do anything special. I just come in and tweak the settings a little bit, and if you see the indirect lighting has a different effect. Maybe I can find a frame where you can see this. Alright, so I found a frame where you can see the difference. So when I change the indirect lighting, you can see this lower part will change a lot, because the indirect lighting bounces off from the ground and the robot. So this part is being lit indirectly. So the top is being lit directly by the light source. So now when I change this, you can see that the top is changing. And so this gives a lot of flexibility for us after rendering. So I'm going to make this a bit darker and maybe remove some of the greens. Yeah. And if you want to see the difference between the color correction and no color correction, you can select your nodes and press M to mute them. So as you can see, it looks a lot better when this is with and this is without. And we can continue and do something with the glossy, maybe add more glossiness, and it will make it, as you can see, the glossy parts are over here. Make it brighter. Maybe add some blue. And you can spend hours doing this. I'm not going to do that. That will be a bit tedious to watch. So I'm going to move on and color correct the robot. Alright, so let's make this a little bit bigger to see it. Yeah, and just do the same thing. So I'm going to duplicate one of those and plug it in here. And before I do any changes, I'm going to duplicate them so that every pass has a color correction, and the default node doesn't affect any of the settings, so that's cool. Alright, so let's look at the diffuse direct, what we can do with this. So obviously all the red parts have some diffuse. I mean the red color is a result of the diffuse pass, as you can see here. So when we want to add more red, we have to increase this. Okay, maybe make it a bit brighter. That looks pretty cool. I think a little bit less indirect lighting. You can see that the lower parts of every red panel is being lit indirectly. So if I remove this, you can see the lower parts are getting dark, but the top is still lit. So maybe just remove this a little bit, or lower this a little bit. Then the glossy part is, of course, we can make it really glossy if we want to, or less glossy. I don't like it too much. I maybe add a little bit more than default. And let's see what the glossy indirect does. Oh, that seems to add more detail of some sort. And maybe do something with the color. Remove some of the greens. Okay. Yeah. Now transmission is only mainly the windows, and we don't see the windows right now. So let's find a frame with the windows. There we go. Alright, so this is a nice frame with the windows. And now you may understand why it's so important to have this image, this camera plane right here, because then anything that refracts through the window matches the background. So if you only had the panorama, it didn't really match exactly this part of the sky, this little thing and this building. So it's really important when you have transparency, you want to have the exact same stuff in the background as your shot. So that's why this really matches. I may want to make this brighter, so what you can do to just multiply the color, you can just make the white level lower. That will make it brighter. Because what it does is, now it's a sort of a gray, so any gray color will be mapped to white. So every gray pixel in the shot will now be white. So that's why it makes it brighter when you lower the white level. Okay, so yeah, maybe make it a little bit more or less red to add some. That looks pretty cool. Give it a blue tint, you know. Okay, and finally we have the emission, which is the eyes are emission. Maybe in one of the first frames you can see them. Okay, here, there you have the eyes. So if we change the emission, you can see the eyes are changing, and it's not really obvious now because those colors are blown out. But to make this apparent, you can add filters to your shot. But before I'm going to do that, let's see the difference. Let's look at the difference between no color correction and color correction. So I'm going to mute those nodes, and we can see, I think it looks a lot better now. Again, you can spend hours doing this. I'm not going to do that. So yeah, we did some color correction to every single pass we have. yeah, right now may be a right time to add filters, and I want to add filters to the final image, so that makes it blend in nicely. So what I'm going to do is just add some glow filters. Let's see. Go to filter and glare. It's called glare, and you can see the default is this kind of star. I want to set it to fog glow, and if you look closely, there's something like a fog glow around his eyes, and you can set the threshold a little bit lower to make it more apparent, maybe to set it to 0.5. Yeah, so now the color correction on the emission has more influence, I think. Not really. Okay, that's because probably the values of these pixels are way above this graph. This graph is from 0 to 1, and if you look at these values, those are 4 for blue, 2.6 for red and green. So I may just want to go in and change the white level again. If we lower the white level, you can see the eyes are much brighter now. So that's, if you want that, you can do it. I'm not gonna make it too bright because they already are pretty bright. So yeah, we now have a nice fog glow. I want to add another one, so let's duplicate this and set it to, let's zoom in, set it to streaks, and I only want to have 2 streaks. That gives us this nice sort of flare along the bright parts. That's pretty cool. Maybe it's a little bit too much, so let's higher the threshold and lower this mix value. There we go. Let's look at this fade. I don't know exactly what it does. Oh, it makes it bigger. Okay. Maybe set the mix to minus 0.5, and that looks pretty cool. Let's collapse them. There's 2 glare nodes. Alright, and I can also collapse this one. Okay, next thing is motion blur. I think it's time for motion blur. Yeah, let me just add them. I already have the passes I need, the depth and vector for both debris and the robot. So the only thing I need to do is add a vector blur node, plug it in after the set alpha, and let's look only at the debris. Maybe go to a different frame to show this a little bit better, and let's just plug in the depth into the z value and the vector into the speed, and it doesn't really change. Oh, the vector is set to single image, that's why it doesn't change. Anyway, let's set it to image sequence, and let's change a frame to update, and now we can see some sort of motion blur. So if I select the vector blur node and press M, you can see the difference. Okay, so yeah, that just helps add more realism to the shot and add some more blending. It also blends the alpha channel, so it blends more with the environment. So yeah, let's do the same thing for the robot. So let's take a look at the final shot over here. And maybe find a frame where the robot is moving fast. Alright, I think his fist is moving at a high speed over here. So this seems like a good frame to show the motion blur. Let's duplicate this vector blur node. And let's let's see. Let's just move it after this set alpha node. Move it into the pipeline and plug in the depth into the Z and the speed into, or sorry, the vector into the speed. Now we should see some motion blur. Yeah, I think his fist, yeah, I can see the difference. You can see that his fist is moving pretty fast. Maybe we can go back to the first, one of the first frames to show his landing. Maybe that's more apparent. Yeah, here you can see clearly it has motion blur. It has vertical motion blur. So yeah, pretty cool. I think I'm gonna leave it at this. In the next part, I will make a next part, and we will do some cleaning up, some masking. I will add some masks for this part where the debris is going behind this, and maybe fix some of these. Oh no, it actually looks pretty good. Fix some of the reflections. I saw some nasty reflections over here. So yeah, we can fix those. So in this part we set up the basic structure of the node setup, and we did color correction on the different passes. It's very flexible, and yeah, we added some filters and motion blur. Yeah, so I mean, this looks pretty good to me. So I will see you in part 10, the final part.